Sanctions, oil, and India's game plan. When the United States slapped fresh sanctions on Russian oil earlier this month, it raised some eyebrows, especially in India, where Russian crude now makes up over a third of the country's total imports. These sanctions are aimed at disrupting Russia's oil revenues by targeting producers, tankers, and even insurers, but for India, it's another test of how skillfully it can navigate an increasingly complicated energy landscape. Hardeep Singh Puri, Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, however, wants to reassure everyone, no need to panic, he says. Speaking to NDTV Profit in an interview, Puri emphasized that India's energy security remains intact. There's plenty of oil in the world, and India is better positioned than most to secure its share. To understand the fuss, let's break it down. The U.S. sanctions, introduced on early in Jan this year, don't just restrict Russian oil exports, they go after the logistics of how that oil reaches countries like India and China. This includes blacklisting tankers and insurers tied to the so-called shadow fleet Russia uses to transport its crude. The goal is to squeeze Russian revenues further, making it harder for Moscow to fund its war in Ukraine. The catch for India: these new sanctions complicate the availability of discounted Russian oil, which has been beneficial for Indian refiners since 2022 due to its lower cost. India started buying Russian oil in 2022 only because it was really cheap and has nothing to do with India's relations with Russia. Puri put it bluntly, if Russian oil is available at good discounts, we will buy it. If it's not, we will buy elsewhere. We buy oil from wherever we get it at the cheapest price. We covered the whole backstory of this in one of the recent episodes titled U.S. Sanctions on Russia Make Things Tough for India. Recently, the Directorate General of Shipping extended approvals for Russian insurers whose name are extremely hard to pronounce, allowing them to cover tankers carrying Russian oil into Indian ports. This bypasses Western insurers who are now under sanctions. It's a clever move that keeps the supply chain flowing, at least for now. However, the U.S. has set a deadline. Sanctioned Russian tankers can only offload their oil in India by February 27, leaving refiners scrambling to finalize deals before that date. Beyond this, India will need alternative shipping arrangements. But Puri remains unfazed. The global oil market is not in a state of scarcity, he said, pointing to increased production in countries like Brazil, Guyana, and Canada. One of the most significant issues tied to Russian crude is its impact on gross refining margins, GRMs, a key metric for refiners that measures the profitability of turning crude oil into finished products like petrol and diesel. Russian crude's discounts are shrinking, from $8.5 per barrel last year to just $3-3.50 now. Alternative supplies like Middle Eastern crude don't offer the same profitability. BPCL's Director of Finance, Betsa Ramakrishna Gupta, recently revealed that Russian oil, which accounted for over 30% of BPCL's refining mix last year, will likely fall to around 20% by March. Gupta also pointed out that declining discounts are adding pressure to refining margins, forcing Indian refiners to reassess their sourcing strategies. But the oil minister still seems optimistic. He mentioned that, our refining capacity is growing rapidly. We're investing 80,000 crore rupees to expand it, ensuring that we're prepared for shifts in the global oil market. Puri pointed to India's growing exploration capabilities and its partnerships with global players to boost domestic production. Petrobras is working with Oil India on offshore surveys in the Andaman Sea. BP is partnering with ONGC to rejuvenate old wells in Bombay High, he said. These efforts, combined with expanding refining capacity, are aimed at reducing India's dependency on imports and bolstering long-term energy security. One of the most striking points Puri made was about India's unique leverage in the global oil market. Unlike some countries struggling to pay for their imports, India's strong economy and ability to pay upfront make it a preferred buyer for oil exporters. This is a buyer's market. We have demand, and we can pay, unlike many countries that are struggling financially, he said. He also said a few other things that were quite interesting. Reflecting on the broader dynamics of the global oil market, he pointed to emerging suppliers like Guyana and Argentina as examples of how new sources are reshaping the landscape. Guyana's story, in particular, stood out. They drilled 16 wells with no success. The 17th well hit the jackpot, oil and gas. And that's just the beginning. There are many other Guyanas waiting to be discovered, he said. Argentina, too, has joined India's import basket, marking another step in India's strategy to diversify its sources. We've gone from sourcing oil from 27 countries to 39. With Argentina coming on board, that number will only grow further, he added. This focus on diversification also ties into India's green energy transition. While the shift to renewables is inevitable, he emphasized that it's not a process that happens overnight. The green transition is critical, but it has a wind in and wind out period. You don't just switch from fossil fuels to renewables, he said. At the same time, he acknowledged that India's oil demand is unlikely to peak anytime soon. Even the most conservative estimates suggest our demand will continue to grow until at least 2040, and possibly 2050, he noted. For now, India's strategy remains clear. Continue to secure affordable oil from diverse sources, expand domestic capabilities, and prepare for long-term energy needs. As Puri put it, conflicts don't last forever, but even if they do, we will navigate around them. Tidbits. The FMCG sector faces rising input costs, with crude palm oil prices up 40% YoY prices up 24%, squeezing margins. Rural demand grew 5% YoY, but urban demand lagged at 0.5%, reflecting inflation's impact on consumption and profitability. India's composite PMI fell to 57.9 in January 2025, with services slowing to a 26-month low while manufacturing hit a 6-month high of 58.0. Strong job creation provides a silver lining, but high inflation and competition challenge the service sector's outlook. China's January manufacturing PMI fell to 49.1, its lowest since August 2024, as weak domestic demand and unemployment weigh on growth. Despite a $1 trillion trade surplus in 2024, export reliance and geopolitical tensions threaten recovery. Thank you for watching. Do share this with your friends and make them as smart as you or winking face. Join the discussion on today's edition here.